is Bojidar from Business Review, and today I will be your host. It is my great pleasure to welcome Esko, who will be presenting a webinar titled Scaling Up with Great Packaging. Today's guest speakers will be Megan Young-Gamble, packaging consultant, the project execution her at Esko, and Adrian Fernandez, VP GM SMB Solutions, Esko. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar platform On24. You'll notice that this webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via email to rejoin the session. In order to ask your questions, you can send them in via the questions box, which will be at your screen. So just type the question there and click submit. We will allocate some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts that you may have. Please use the yellow help widget if you require any assistance, and you can also move, resize, and maximize all the windows in front of you to get a better view of the slides. But now, allow me to welcome Adrian.
Thank you, Bojidar. Welcome everybody to this webinar. We are talking about how to scale up with great packaging. And just to ground us, let me start by aligning on when we talk about packaging, what are we talking about? Then why packaging sometimes can be hard, and then why packaging is important for brands. So let's start with what is packaging. And at the highest level, we are talking about the most obvious, the different structures that we see out there, from folding carton, to basically give us a structure on the shelf, corrugated containers. Now we give us also strength for transportation, but still we can get some nice tray shelves that can look great. Then flexible bags with multi-layer film that can protect the content and still give us, a great look and feel. And beyond that, we have labels, probably the most versatile of all the different packaging types that usually get affixed, to different rigid containers. And then kind of my favorite is shrink sleeves, because it extends the surface to do more brand messaging, to talk more about content, to look great in the shelf. And finally, rigid containers, which usually come attached with labels, either pressure-sensitive labels or in-molded labels. Now, having said that, when we talk about packaging, we are also talking about this kind of displays. So let's talk about one by one. Point of purchase displays. This is a way to grab space in the end caps, very popular in mass merchants. I mean, pretty much across all retail. Then we go into the retail-ready packaging. Again, I think it was popularized by Walmart in the 90s. It used to be called the PDQ, the pretty darn quick. And the idea of this is that it will make it easier to restock the shelf. And then finally, club stores packaging. We're talking about the pallet configurations, which again, popular some club, but also, to grab extra space in the aisles. I remember doing this in Walmart. Just a quick tip, if you're gonna go this way, make sure you do transit tests before shipping to retail, because you will be surprised what things show up. Telling you after paying fees and getting penalized with that. Moving along, there's 3 levels of packaging. And again, trying to put some basics in place. The first one is what we call primary packaging. And basically this envelopes the product, holds the product, and is usually the smaller unit of distribution that you can get in the market. Following the same example, you have secondary packaging, which is basically outside the primary packaging. And by then, as you can see in this case, we are even changing the materials and the printing process, but has to look the same. And then the third level is we call it tertiary or transit. Now, these 2 versions of this you see on the screen. One is about to manage bulk with pallets for, again, storage, transportation. But then at the bottom of the screen, you can see that Colgate shipper. This is for DTC, direct to consumer. And I would say in the last 10 years with e-commerce, this has become much more popular and as important from the brand statement. I mean, I think all of us are familiar with the unboxing experience that many people are expecting when they're buying now any kind of product. So it's not anymore about the shipper alone. It's also about the brand statement that people are experiencing with it. Now, moving to the next topic, why packaging could be so hard. So there's 6 different factors that comes to play. The first one is about the people that participate. So in this screen, you can see a simple label, and I'm using simple in quoting marks. And out of the gate, you are seeing different sections or different departments, and even from different companies that need to participate: marketing, regulatory, legal, operations, and printing. The second factor is all about the specific elements that are included to make this label that needs to be accounted for, captured, and reviewed to make this label. And in this, again, simple label, we can see that we counted 76 different elements that need to be accounted for. And as you can see, also, these elements are attributed to the different departments, so they are not coming from a single person, they're coming from different people that need to participate and collaborate to make this happen. So again, just using the example of a simple label, just point out the first 2 factors. We're talking about the different elements to make the label, and the second one is the amount of people that needs to participate. Following this on people, there's different processes or part of the production that needs to be involved. So here we are seeing the same thing now in a flow standpoint. So we're going from design to pre-production and production. And again, the key thing here is that these functions in many cases are executed within silos and working at different companies. Again, driving more complexity and need for coordination and collaboration. And if you overlay further, where are these people working and the kind of roles? Again, you can see that the input from one becomes the output from one becomes the input from the other. And even the sequence where this is happening is important to consider. Megan will cover this later in more detail. What are the key milestones that we need to accomplish as we move from design all the way to production? The third factor that makes packaging relatively hard is we have different shapes. Okay, and in this case, you have a combination of some rigid shapes and some flexible shapes. Move to the 4th factor. Now we're going in materials. So, you can talk about what are we going to be using as underlying substrate. It's paper, metallics, film, corrugate. Again, each of them behave different and, needs to be accounted for as we are picking up the artwork. And then the 5th factor is the different printing processes. And here we are showing the typical one combined not only on what kind of process it is, but also what are the ones that are compatible from a material and substrate standpoint and the different use cases that we showed before. Clearly, in popularity, we have offset, flexo, and gravure. And then in the last 15 years, digital has significantly grown into the market. And, at the end of the day, this is a discussion of trade-off on materials, color accuracy, finishing effects, and then the economics of it, which is associated with what are the print run quantities, the speed to market, and the cost. As there are setup costs in some of these processes versus some variable costs that need to account it. So these are all the elements that comes to play when we are talking about the different printing processes. And then the last factor I want to mention is the type of inks, which influences, the color that we're going to have, the finishing that we're going to have. So questions here is, as you can see in my background too, what is the gamut that you can use? Spot colors, also usually used with a Pantone guide versus process color, CMYK. In some cases, if you're going into flexo and some other, spaces, are you going extended gamut, which gives you another rich on colors? And then are you going to be using special effects, like metallics inks, embossing? And finally, even higher, do you need to have some specialty inks for security all the way to holograms and RFID? Again, different things that comes to play that are associated with the inks and the finishing that can be picked. So how does it all comes together? So here's an example. This is where we see how a brand can drive consistency across materials and print processes in individual products. But then beyond that, that gets combined. So here's where we see it working together and still achieving that consistency on brand and look and feel. So we have a combination on the left of the folding carton tray with the glass silkscreen label attached to the bottle. And then on the right-hand side, you can see we're combining metal flexo direct on cans, the film flexo on the shrink wrap, and the corrugated flex on the tray, and still looking great, looking consistent. But that's usually not even the end of it. We can go further on this because we need to drive consistency beyond packaging. And here are the places where this also comes to play. You want to have that look and feel, in signage, in any kind of backup materials, even on the vending machines. So these are all considerations to have as one start picking and trying to scale the brand look and feel on packaging. Now, when this comes all together, we have some examples of what great looks like. So these are some really nice examples that we find. Just look at, this is for the geeks in the audience. I think we have a few. So this is something that we saw in a club, and you can see here, how everything comes together. So here you have a cartons inside the tray. The artwork is crossing over to make a seamless image between the folding carton and the tray. And likely these components were printed in different locations, potentially by different vendors, and still this looks great. As a colleague of mine said, just give me a headache to think about how they put this together. This is, kind of a high-end packaging art. And then here's another example. Again, this is another club solution, and you can see how the box is stacked on the pallet and the artwork crossover, and by the way, have access from 3 sizes so everybody can shop around. So that's when all comes together and looks good. What happened the other way when something goes wrong? And here's some examples of that. If you focus on the center of the screen, the baby face, clearly there is a disconnect of the artwork and the structural design. And then the rest is really misspelling, wrong artwork, wrong quantities, allergen information missing. So some challenges that we see in the market and that can have some consequences. So then just finishing up this section, why packaging is important for brands. And here are 5 factors that are actually part of a much longer webinar. So I'm going to really run through this pretty quickly. I'm going to focus on the key points. But, starting from the top, packaging is important at the most basic level because of the product protection and protecting the consumer safety. That's just starting point. As you move down, to number 2, is also important because the packaging will define, it's a significant impact of the sustainability of the product in the market. Okay, and this is another thing that we're going to talk to Megan a little later, so I'm going to leave it there. Furthermore, and now getting closer to the consumer, is about consumer engagement. And this is where it's important that the packaging itself, the look and feel, drives quality, can drive emotional connection, and needs to help on brand recognition. Think about this: typos, damages, off colors, inaccurate images really affect the perception and the choice on both the physical and the digital shelf. Number 4 is all about, speed to market. In order for us to have a product, it needs to be packaging ready. And to win as a brand, you have to meet deadlines. The deadlines of consumer expectation if it's a DTC, deadlines, contractual deadlines when we're talking with retailers. And if we have a specific trade-in promotion, we cannot miss that window. All of them, 1 to 4, ends up into 5, which is all about tying to trust, loyalty, and brand equity. And the small, and basically this goes back to the packaging becoming the 5th P in the marketing mix of product, place, price, and promotion. For a small and young brand that is trying to bring brand equity, packaging, I will make the argument that is the number 2 P in the priority of those 5, because it's one that is controllable as much as the product, while the other ones almost are imposed or negotiated. So it becomes fundamental to work on that. And then for the established big brand, that is working to protect and even expand the brand equity, again, packaging can be a contributor or it can be a problem. And we all know brand equity takes years, a lot of money, and it could take, if we just look at this for a second, on the negative effect, just to give a sense, a study says that an average recall for a big brand could cost up to $10 million or more. but the reputational damage that the packaging recall can do, it's actually very hard to recover. So with that really positive note, I'm going to move to how we're going to talk about scaling up for great packaging. So let me pass to Megan to get us into that topic.
Awesome. Thank you, Adrian. And before we go into talking about how to really define and really start setting the foundation for your brands, from what we just covered, I realized that a lot of brands, and also with me working with brands simultaneously, a lot of startup and growing brands do not have brand guidelines in place. So regardless of if you're that young or growing brand, that's where the brand equity really comes in, and the packaging is the second P as part of your marketing mix. And as brand equity is starting to be developed and cultivated over the years, which takes a lot of money and effort and time, having your brand guidelines in place is going to be the foundation. But before you can actually start executing your packaging, the first thing you need to know is, what is the clarity of purpose? Where are we going? Where are we heading? What is the outcome? What product are we launching that we intend to offer to our consumer that's going to solve that pain point or offer that solution? So before we get into creating the product for it to be tangible for your consumer, there's a couple of things you do need to know that help set the baseline for determining clarity of purpose to then transition you to having clarity on purpose. So let's talk about it. So in reference of setting the foundation that Adrian has talked about, where you're seeing within box stores, where you have the Cheez-Its brand who's actually creating the actual inner pouches based upon the flexo print, to then having the shipping box, to then having the actual trays that are housed within Costco. The actual brand Cheez-It was able to cultivate that because they were able to get very clear in reference of 4 key elements, which is number 1, your goals. What do we want to achieve? What is the intended outcome with us launching this product in the market? And also, where is it going to be positioned at within the market? Second thing, being very crystal clear of the internal and external roles. Who does what, at what point, when, how, and how do you get everybody involved to help create this beautiful product and launch it into the marketplace? Third, what are the processes? With me being a project manager, processes are key for me and really is a driving force with a lot of the efforts with working alongside of brands. So what are the approval, rejection, decision points? Who is actually the decision maker? If we don't have an approval, what is the actual process? Who does what? What is our central repository? Who updates the records and more? To then fourth, coming down to those interpersonal relationships. How do we actually optimize the ways of working? How do we determine the ground rules? How do we interact with each other internally, as well as with some external stakeholders that we'll talk about here momentarily? Once you're able to get clarity of these 4 key elements, you're then able to start creating what I like to call your project requirements gathering checklist. Within your project requirements, this is the baseline of creating those products. So knowing what market we're going into, knowing what type of product it is, what's the actual intention when we're actually working with our consumers when they see it, what type of feeling do we want them to have, sensory experience, what is our sustainability approach? All of these is part of your initial requirements. And this is the foundation to ensure that you're starting to have clarity of purpose with each new product and extension that you're having within your product line as well. And so with this, you know, a lot of times we're like, well, who does what? How do we determine what requirements are in place? We'll talk about that here momentarily in just a minute. But the requirements gathering is a key fact-finding exploration phase. This should be conducted before you are initiating any project plan, before you're starting to work on design. This is the foundation, and this is really the research and the baseline to help you with starting to execute your packaging. And then as you're scaling up your packaging with new products, line extensions, and more, these foundational aspects is helping to make sure that you are able to scale up your packaging as your brand is growing and evolving. So the type of packaging, Adrian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. So picking up on the project requirements, you know, packaging changes, not all packaging changes are made equal. I mean, this is here we're showing a progression from something that takes short time and not that difficult, all the way to something that will, it's exactly on the opposite side. So, the easiest and the fastest, should be when we're changing an element of the artworks. Think about changing a country of origin because we're going from one country to the other. We are changing an ingredient because, somehow it's becoming more available or more affordable. So that should be easy because, again, there's no significant change in the structure on the artwork. When you move to the next level of a product extension, now we're getting even more complicated. Now we are adding a new flavor to an existing product. Now we're going from a 6-pack to a 12-pack because we're going to a larger retailer that has different shelf turns. And then the next one, especially now, is about the packaging type change. This is where, for whatever reason, in some cases to meet sustainability goals, in some other cases, because we're trying to reach a different demographics, we may be moving away from, let's say, a jar and going into a flexible turns, or we're even changing the materials within the same type of packaging style. Beyond that, now we're getting into complex projects. When we're talking about the rebrand, that is a long-term project. We're getting new people involved or new stakeholders, like potentially an agency to give us the rebranding, consumer research to test that, and then the whole process of deployment, with a running change or, even a hard change to get the SKUs into the system. And finally, the new product. And I guess the tip here is don't do a new product and, and then do the packaging, do it in parallel. That's a whole discussion on its own. But really, it's a key component. The packaging is part of the product, and that's the way that we should be considering. So in all these cases, having robust standard work with the right people, as Megan was mentioning, is critical to ensure speed and errors and repeatability. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to move away as we scale up from packaging changes being a special event and a nightmare to a repeatable, reliable, standardized engine that is a contributor to the brand growth. So now, Megan was going to walk us through the standard work for that new packaging creation and scaling up.
Thank you, Adrian. So as Adrian really showed, there's multiple levels based upon project lead time and also the complexity of how you actually create your products and start initiating the design and artwork phase. And so what are some simple tools that you can get started with to help align on your clarity of purpose to make sure you then have clarity on purpose as you're scaling up your packaging? So displayed on the screen are 2 forms that I recommend having in reference of your toolkit. The first one that's displayed on the left side of the screen is your sample dossier document. I utilize this with brands as we're kicking off our product development. This also, in reference of the requirements checklist I shared with you, helps with completion of this dossier form that we'll look at a little bit more in depth. And with us creating the dossier document, this helps with creation and input into the product design brief. And so now I'm going to actually share my screen to walk you a little bit through the dossier document just within the first page, just to show how this information starts to help with building upon and creation of your product design brief. So as I'm pulling this up, this is something that I use alongside of the different brands and teams that I work with. And this is kind of like my kickoff document when I'm working with brands. And this is part of that fact finding that I utilize with the requirement checklist to ensure that I'm starting to capture the requirements, knowing where we're going, knowing what is our ultimate goals, to then know what are the processes and other inputs that we should consider. So now you should be able to see my screen. And displayed is what my dossier document looks like. And I could walk you through this whole document, but that will be for a whole nother webinar. But the main elements that I really want you all to focus on is going to be highlighted here in the top. So if I've captured my requirements based upon the checklist I provided to you, what is the scope, who all is involved, what markets are we going into, what is the actual intentions of this product, how do we want to convey the packaging, all of those elements that is captured within that requirement checklist, this helps me with building out this first page of the dossier document. So once I determine, my project details, I really need to know what is the launch type. So the launch type will be, is this a hero or a core SKU item? So living in the portfolio for about 1 to 3 years, Or is it an in and out product? So like a limited edition holiday item, bundles, trying to offload excess items to create limited edition products or exclusive items, etc. The most important thing I need to know is based upon the launch type, if it's in a hero SKU or if it's going to be a limited edition, I need to really determine what is the expected lifespan. So if it's a hero or a inline item, your lifespan may be about 3 years. But if it's a limited edition item that could be, for holiday season, that may be only 3 to 6 months, depending upon where you're at in your brand. Other important details is going to be really in reference of your launch and your in-house and your due dates. You see displayed on the screen, I have multiple dates that I'm tracking to. So I may have a pre-sale date based upon when I want to kind of get started, get that soft launch, get that initial buy-in with the market. This may have a different date from when I actually launch on my website or through e-commerce if you're working with different retailers. Retail launch, this could be in combination of e-commerce or in store. So this may have a different launch date than potentially your web launch. PR due date. This one is really key because if you're starting to work with influencers, whether it's micro or macro level, you may have different PR dates to actually launch your products to start getting it in front of your consumers and start getting that initial buy-in as well. And then in-house date. What date does it actually need to arrive to my fulfillment center if you're utilizing a 3PL, or if it's going directly to your headquarters or to the retail headquarters? We need to specify those in-house dates. And then also, what is the ETA for our actual go live launch dates? So you may have different staggering dates for when you're actually going to get your product out here. And including this into your dossier document is foundational because you're starting to build upon your requirements, you're then knowing what market it's going to be in, you know how long it's going to be available on the shelf and more. And then also, are we launching into global markets? Is it just a US only launch? Is it US and Canada? Is it US and international? What does that look like? How do we keep abreast about the different regulations that are in place? How do we stay abreast about what packaging aspects we need to be considering going into these global markets and more? So all of this is foundational. And if you're starting to really build upon your requirements and really doing that fact finding and really sticking true to those 4 core elements that I mentioned, goals, roles, processes, and interpersonal relationships, this helps with creation of this dossier document. To then go further down into the second element, which is product information. So if you completed your requirements, you should be able to complete this with ease. So what is the category for launching this product? So if I'm creating a new skincare product, that's skincare within the beauty world. What's the reason for the SKU? So Adrian shared a little bit about the different complexities for launching new packaging design. But new product, that's a little bit more complex and longer lead time versus doing an artwork element change. So really getting crystal clear in reference of what is our actual reason for this SKU or for an update is really paramount. Of course, you want to always have a general description of what product you're launching in the marketplace. If you're launching multiple shades, so this is something really paramount if you're creating just a cosmetic product, because that's the industry I work in. You're creating a cosmetic product and you're launching a whole new lipstick. And say, for instance, I want to launch 4 new shades. Well, those 4 new shades needs to be captured here within this dossier document. Same thing for, if you're creating skincare serums or if you're creating different beverages in different flavors, things of that sort, but your base ingredients may be potentially the same. Those things need to be captured here. And then, of course, the fun part, which is the target packaging in deco. So when I work with brands, I always ask them to give me a benchmark or what is their packaging inspiration, to then look at their dossier to see what markets we're launching into, seeing what is the intention and how we want to evoke that emotion with our consumers. So we're starting to build that brand equity. And then also determining, are there any sustainability initiatives that we need to be mindful of? This is really paramount in this day and age because everybody is talking about sustainability. What does it look like? Is it for me? How do I make my packaging sustainable? And then now with us having legislation in place, here within starting in the US in its infancy stage, these are things that we're having to stay abreast about, as well as with retail requirements. So I wanted to share this with you all so you can see behind the scenes of creation of the dossier document that can then roll over into a product design brief. And so within the product design brief, as you're at this clarity of purpose phase, the dossier document will help with building out your preliminary product design brief to capture the brand information, the aesthetics, what is our actual brand guidelines. That's why it's really paramount to have that, because now we're starting to really think about the brand equity, how it conveys onto packaging, and also how do we resonate with the consumers outside of packaging, from our website to different planograms, things of that sort. So it's really key to have this information to help serve as your baseline, so then you're able to build upon it. And so now I'm going to transition back to the live screen to then see how all of this comes together. So as I shared in reference of building out your dossier document, you really need to understand what is your sustainability strategy. And a lot of times brands say, I want to be sustainable. But the first question I really encourage each and every one of you all to think about is, what does sustainability mean for me and my brand? So this can mean a lot of different things. And I'm just going to highlight 3 areas that I normally see with brands when they talk about their sustainability strategy. First aspect is corporate environment, social, and governance, which is also referenced as the acronym ESG. So within ESG, this is really looking at what is our impact in the sustainability initiatives as part of the environment. So if you're looking at reduction of carbon emissions, looking at utilizing more sustainable substrate materials, the impact within the environment, also potentially with your co-packers, converters, printers, manufacturers, et cetera, looking at their production and also the output of carbon emissions. Second aspect, from a social standpoint, this may be tapping into your diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we actually bring other people into the conversation? And then lastly is governance. So this is probably my favorite aspect of ESG, because as a project manager, I need some governance. I need some structure in place. So ESG can be one aspect of your sustainability strategy. That could be internal or external. Second aspect of building up your sustainability strategy is really, I want everybody to start researching extended producer responsibility. I'll share resources at the end of where you can learn more about it, but I want this to definitely be top of mind for all of you all, because here in the US, we're starting to pass legislation where EPR, extended producer responsibility, from a packaging standpoint, is now having to be considered for brands to start thinking about the end of life use of the packaging. And it also could be some financial implications as well. So even though we're still in this infancy stage of this legislation, because legislation has only passed within 4 states right now, California being one of them, we still have a long ways to go, but it's here and it's coming down the pipeline. And these are things that should be considered for you brands as you're starting to scale up with your packaging, scaling up with your company and your respective pursuits, to really start thinking about the end of life use of a product and also what that can mean for you and your brand. And then the next aspect of your sustainability strategy is understanding your retailer requirements. So as I shared the dossier document, I highlighted which markets is it going into, and the retailers is really part of that global market strategy. So if I know I want to launch a product in Target versus Whole Foods, they may have their different brands, different retailers, they also have different retailer requirements. But what are the commonalities between those two to make sure that I'm in alignment with their sustainability initiatives? So like if you're looking to go into Target, are you prepared for having your packaging be recyclable or compostable by 2025 with your placement in Target? So these are retailer requirements that we're having to really think about and really learn, and making sure that we're capturing that at the beginning of development, as well as before we're initiating packaging, because all of this has a trickle-down impact. And these 3 aspects of understanding your sustainability strategy helps you to have clarity on purpose. And so as we're building upon the sustainability aspect, one other key important element is knowing what's your regulatory requirements. So with regulatory and legal, I call them the redliners because they're always the ones to redline a lot of the key elements of what we can and cannot say, what this should be from a font size to placement of information and more. And so displayed on the screen is very high level, an example of a nutritional facts panel that we commonly see on all of our favorite products right now. Kettle Brands being one of mine. I love potato chips. So within looking at this nutrition facts panel, from a regulatory perspective, there's a lot of key elements that are highlighted here to make sure that it's visible for us as consumers. So we know that this is the nutritional facts panel. It's going to outline the number of servings. That has a respective font size. What's the serving size? That's a font size from a regulatory perspective. The number of calories per serving. I want to know how many potato chips can I eat with one serving, and I may opt to go over the recommended serving size because I'm looking at the nutritional facts panel. So all this information that you see within the nutritional facts panel is very high level, but it's also very critical because this goes to show you that regulatory is vital. So as you're starting to scale up your company, scale up your packaging, regulatory needs to be part of your team. And they definitely need to have input and visibility of what you're creating in the marketplace to then look at what the regulations are for your respective industry to then give you insight of what this information needs to be, what information needs to be captured, and the information that they as regulatory would review as well to make sure that you're compliant. You captured all the information, you're hitting on all the critical information for your respective country. So that's where knowing which markets you're going into is critical based upon the dossier document. And then also making sure that if you are going globally, what does that look like in capturing those requirements as well? So make sure that based upon your respective industry, you are working alongside of a regulatory specialist because they will help give you all the tools you need to make sure that you are compliant and ready for launch in the market. And so now, since we've talked about some of the key baselines for getting clarity on purpose, now it is time to get to the fun part, which is actually starting to plan and actually execute on those things, utilizing some effective project management, which is my number one love as well, since I'm a project manager. And so let's talk about how to set the tone for the project. So let me just recap of what we just talked about. So we understood those 4 core elements: goals, roles, processes, interpersonal relationships. We then talked about how to build upon your project requirements with the checklist I provided you. Then we talked about based upon those requirements, we then were able to cultivate that sample dossier document that I showed you with knowing the project details and the launch details. We then talked about how to really get clear of your sustainability strategy, and then also regulatory, why that's so important. So since you have a baseline and you now have clarity of the packaging you're going to be launching for that intended product, now it is time to set the tone for the project. And this is where I really love this stage, because now the first thing we need to do before we get to creation of a project timeline, we need to start confirming timing with our suppliers, our printers, internal and external team members. So remember, where are we going? What is our goal? What is the outcome? All of this is really starting to set the foundation to ensure that we're starting to work with all internal, external stakeholders to then start getting timing to see what is feasible to then help us get to what is our speed to market approach that Adrian talked about. Then, once we're able to capture that information, it is time for the team kickoff. This is where all parties of your team needs to be involved and part of this conversation. This helps not only to gain alignment amongst your team, but it's also to ensure that everybody is in alignment with the scope of work. What is all the work that is necessary to be completed? And then also, not only from a project level, which is overarching everything, but even down to the micro level within packaging. So what is the packaging? What is the emotion, sensory experience we want to evoke with our consumer? What are all of those details? This kickoff is going to help set the tone for your project to then build upon creation of your project timeline for each stage gate. And displayed is very high level of a micro timeline for just packaging, artwork, copy, etc., that I utilize alongside of the brands I work with as well. So setting the tone for your project is going to help with not only gaining alignment from your internal, external team members, but it also helps to know that we're going all on the same rhythm. And you continue that cadence ongoing within your team as well. So Adrian, I'll let you share a little bit about this portion.
Thank you, Megan. And I think we talk about standardizing and coming up with an engine that allows us to scale up. So, you know, this is an important part where, because everybody starts from a tools standpoint with an action plan spreadsheet, similar to what we saw in the prior screen from Megan, you know, with live and even email notification, live as in meetings, and then notifications to keep everybody going. You know, in order to coordinate, we're talking, people start using files versions in different shared drive folders or even cloud sharing. And then there is this recurring team calls to review the progress, you know, and address the issues. And then a project manager that is really monitoring, and I want to say chasing stakeholders. That's where everybody starts from a brand standpoint. However, you know, the advantages of this model is, you know, all these tools are familiar, are easy to design or fairly easy to design, agree and align and roll out, and is mostly free or already paid for. Now, what are the pitfalls of using some of these more general tools? Well, you know, it's hard to see, you know, and know where the project stands at any given point. If anything is stuck, it's hard to catch that until there is a weekly call where someone brings it up. It's hard to keep up, to know where an updated task is, especially if there's multiple parties involved with different locations and time zones. I mean, post-COVID world, we're all living into that right now. And then it's hard to manage parallel and sequential tasks. It's hard to see if people are jumping the line and recurring rework. And most of the burden of this work to keep, let's say, everybody aligned falls into the project manager and lands back into the graphic designer or the structural designer to try to accommodate for all the changes that are flowing through. So bottom line, as the volume of packaging changes increases and there's more participants, you know, and this semi-manual process with generic tool doesn't really scale well. And this is where the existing tools that can help for this. You know, if we just look at, again, as a progression and maturity, you know, we start with the generic tools that we just mentioned, but even there are tools, and for example, Esko, who has been in the market for 10 years with different tools, we have different levels of complexity and that we offer. So, you know, there's a basic collaboration tool just to review and approve based on an online digital proofing that is called Share and Approve. Then you can, and more advanced version of that is a multi-tenant version that has more functionality, such as mocks, all the way to an enterprise solutions for large CPG companies with really complex and many SKUs launched per year in different languages. They have, Esko offers something called Web Center as well as Blue. So there again, there's a progression that can go as there's more SKUs and more participants in the workflow and complexity. And you know, in terms of what these tools look like, let me show you some simple examples on how does it work. So for example, here's a project dashboard. Each of these lines is a project, and all the stakeholders can quickly see where each our project is at a glance. It's updated in real time as the embedded tasks are being addressed, and everybody can see quickly, you know, which projects are on time, which projects are at risk, and which projects are already behind, so people can act immediately. Another page that is important is a project overview. So basically, we're double clicking on any of the projects in the prior page, and the stakeholders can quickly see, you know, what is required to be done at the task level. So the what is being done, who is the owner, the due date, the status, and again, color coding when anybody is behind. So, you know, again, without even a project manager, you can still see where things are going, and, you know, if anybody needs to jump in. Beyond that, there is a version of this, of the project, which is a project workflow, where clearly you can see the same task, but now organized, so you can see the difference between parallel tasks versus sequential tasks that sometimes are critical in terms of whose turn to participate and to jump into the project. And I think the final version is this is what a stakeholder homepage would look like. Let's say, the legal team or the packaging engineer itself, where basically that person can see her or his own task, projects, and even the assets in a single page, and highlighting which ones are on time, which ones are at risk, and which ones are behind. So again, no need now to be searching through a list of emails to see which one they have to jump first and to keep up. So at this point, I'd like to do a quick poll. So let me go to the next page, and I'm going to ask everybody to take a minute and to provide, where do you stand today? So what tools do you use for packaging artwork project management? There's 4 options. The first one is kind of the manual process, let's call it, with a spreadsheet with emails and team meetings. The second one is using maybe a typical marketing or R&D cloud app like Asana, Rike, Jira, Basecamp. Number 3 is a specific packaging-specific solution, such as Mox or Web Center, or I don't know. And if you guys can move over, you can see, you can pick what's your choice. So let's just give you a minute so we can see the results. So please go into your screen and click which one is the most representative of your current state.
Yes, just as Adrian said, just choose the option that you like the most and then click submit. And then in a few minutes, we will see what is the most popular answer. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds. Okay, the final seconds to cast your vote. Okay, I think we can now move on, Adrian.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we have a 50-50. Good. Excellent. So then let's move to the next section. And we're going to talk about creative collaboration. So let me go back to you, Megan, and talk about who needs to play ball here.
Absolutely. So who needs to play ball? Everybody, because all of the parties are really critical to the creation and scaling up your packaging. So displayed on the screen are just a few stakeholders in the packaging world that you see displayed. And they all should be part of this collaboration process, because as Adrian shared a picture of all the label and all the different aspects that the different cross-functional team members had to review, they're part of this, they're part of your stakeholders. And so everybody definitely needs to be part of this collaboration to ensure that your packaging help catch errors, to not have bird be misspelled, or you creation of dog food and it says cat food. All of those things are important, as well as ensuring that you are compliant for your markets in the other areas. So in reference of the cycle of packaging design, this is a very high level overview of what it takes going from concept to the retail shelf. And this is very compressed. And so the one thing that I really want you all to think about and focus on is we have this ideation in the concept stage, which is the light bulb displayed on the far left. And then as we're starting to align on our packaging samples, we know what's the packaging we're going to utilize, which then goes to the tube and the bottle. Then we proceed on to actually executing the design aspects. So working with internal, external graphic designers, our co-packers, converters, et cetera, whoever may be producing your graphics for your packaging. And then it goes through this loop of continuous iterations, because we may say we don't like this place here, we may not like this, or there's revisions that are necessary based upon regulatory, legal, or the other functional teams that is part of your stakeholder team. And so what are some of the tools that you would recommend as you're starting to go through this loop of packaging design and routing assets for artwork before you release it to actually get printed samples of your graphics onto the packaging? So going back to the product design brief. So when we talked about clarity on purpose, we started cultivating the preliminary design brief. But now as we started to kick off our project team, host our kickoff meetings, We're then coming back to this to see if our dossier document has been updated, going from US to global market launches. We may have changed the design aesthetics of it. This is a great opportunity to revisit your preliminary design brief and then update it accordingly based upon any approved changes that have gone through. Once you've aligned and completed your final design brief, you're now ready to execute packaging artwork and start routing it to the teams. But who should be reviewing what information on your packaging? Next important thing is creation of a simple one-page RACI chart that you see displayed on the right side of your screen. If you highlight who are the different functional groups that needs to be reviewing your artwork and also displaying who is responsible for what, it helps mitigate the risk of operations reviewing something for regulatory and regulatory potentially missing something or vice versa. Also with your, with marketing team, they may be looking at only the copy, but are they looking at trademark information, the usage instructions, et cetera, alongside of product development? All parties are required to be part of this collaboration process to help mitigate the risk of having misspellings, artwork not in alignment with the production of the assets, and also getting your converters, printers involved in the conversation as well. These help serve as the generic tools to get started with and also utilize as you're routing your respective artwork. And so coming back to this page here, if we're still focusing on this loop, what are some of those key milestones that we should be focused on? First thing is concept alignment. So we've aligned on the concept, we've hosted our kickoff meeting. Now we started to get samples and we've aligned on the packaging samples. That's a key milestone. Then being able to route it and get design alignment from all internal, external parties, that is another key milestone. Then being able to release your artwork to your printer, your converter, or your co-packer, and having those conversations, that is a key milestone. And a bonus thing I would also add is as you're releasing your artwork to the printer, your co-packer, converter, set up a pre-press meeting. This is really key because this is a great opportunity in that also that creative collaboration with internal, external members to ensure that your aesthetics for the design is able to be properly executed based upon substrate materials that Adrian talked about earlier, understanding the print method. So if it's digital, if you're just starting off, but now you're scaling up your packaging with increased quantities, and now you're going to Flexo or you're going to rotogravure, et cetera, those are aspects that needs to be communicated alongside of your designers, printers, co-packers, and also your internal team or external team members, including you as the brand owner, PD, and potentially marketing and ops as well. And this is where collaboration is key because then once we align on the actual aesthetics from that pre-press meeting, we then are able to go into our pre-production samples, get approval on those to then proceed forward with mass production, transit, and then having it be readily available on the shelf for your consumers to purchase. And so, Adrian, let's talk a little bit about some of the common things people do and some of the advantages and pitfalls with creative collaboration.
Thank you, Megan. So similar to what we did before, in creative collaboration, everybody starts with the existing tools. So there is the typical routing of a PDF file, the old-fashioned physical printout that everybody circulates, routes, and signs off, or kind of a more digitized version, which is basically takes the form of an email with an attachment of the PDF. People can review and send that back comments. The challenge with these solutions, especially the digital one, is that many stakeholders or all the stakeholders are sending multiple emails with annotations to a point person. And then, usually that person is the project manager and the graphic designer. Then the graphic designer needs to circulate multiple revisions, okay, with all the changes that are flowing through and in securing all the parties' approval, okay? Again, advantages, familiar tools. This is easier to put together. But there are some challenges. There's the version control nightmare. Which one is the right one? Especially as people are having not a lot of time and they don't want to get caught into reviewing the wrong one. There's lost or redundant annotations. Needs to be catching all the emails. And then the other one of my favorites in the past is where is the artwork? Where is it sitting? In the process. And it's like, okay, who has it? And then how to chase it and make sure it's moving. And then finally, once even the files are done, errors in file sharing. we're talking about sending to the, the final version to the printer, and are we sending the right one, or are we sending an early version that has been approved by the team? So again, this method usually don't scale well. So if we talk about some of those tools that we described before, what are the things that this fit-for-purpose tool can provide? So let me share some screens of what it looks like. What you see here on the screen right now is basically an online proofing layout viewer where different stakeholders can capture annotations and checks. The color boxes represent different personas, and you can see, that someone working on the ink, some people are working on the legal aspects. The next one is showing a side-by-side comparison of two labels, two different versions. On the left, you see the version 1 with annotations, and on the right, you see version 2 that has been corrected. So everybody that has made those annotations can quickly review and verify that they were done to their needs. And then finally, so here's a version, here's how you see it with the annotation itself. And then finally, here's a digital asset management place where all those files that has been managed, and particularly the last version, can be tagged, posted, and shared, and avoiding the discussion of which version is. And I think that's where we are right now. I'm going to skip the poll number 2 for now because of time, and let's just get into the recap. So couple of bullets here. Packaging, we talk about as a critical element of the marketing mix, plays a big role in trust, loyalty, and brand equity. Great packaging, as Megan has described in detail, is really a result of a team effort that has to be based on a practical but yet robust standard work that requires a coordinated collaboration across different disciplines and organization. And finally, when we are scaling up, we are talking about effective managing our work development evolves from generic tools to fit for purpose on project management, our review, and eventually driving that collaboration that brings the whole team together to have a great product to the market. And Megan, you mentioned some resources that people can have access to help them with some of these topics.
Absolutely. So regardless of where you are in the process, if you do not have a regulatory specialist, make sure you check out the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. They have information for all industries to help give you a baseline, but I still recommend you to have a regulatory specialist to help suit your particular product. If you're wanting to learn more about how to cultivate your sustainability strategy and also learning more about EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, start with SPC, Sustainable Packaging Coalition, where they actually outline more in depth of what EPR is and also the impacts. And then the other references are definitely available to help you with cultivating your sustainable strategy. And then of course, you always want to learn on the go. So there are some great podcasts that I recommend for you all to check out to help you with scaling up your packaging. And then I will be coming out with my own podcast soon here in the summertime too. So I hope to see you all checking out that content as well. So hope you all got a screenshot of the resources because these are going to help you set the foundation for scaling up great packaging.
And with that, we want to finish giving you the chance to see how you can contact us. And we realize we are running short on time for questions. So there is an opportunity to reach out to us through this communication mechanism, and we will happy to follow up and hopefully helping you with that scaling up that we've been discussing so far.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adrian. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
No, I was just saying thank you all for being present with us and tuning in, and we look forward to connecting with you all further.
Yes, of course. Thank you for both of you. To all the attendees, you will soon receive an email with an on-demand version of this webinar. So even if you couldn't get a screenshot of the previous resources, you'll be able to watch the replay and see them there. That just leaves me to thank Adriana and Megan for this great session and to Esko for sponsoring this session. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.